Father Jerry Rogers, he was in fact the pastor and the superintendent right here at Sacred Heart. This is back in 1981 to 1990, so for quite a while. After leaving Sacred Heart, he went on he became a missionary and went to Africa. He returned to the diocese, was at Holy Rosary in Detroit Lakes, and now serves on the Indian Reservation at St. Mary's. He was ordained a priest here at Sacred Heart and considers this his home parish. So let's welcome up Father Rogers.
As they introduced me, my name is Father Jerry. I am now the pastor of Red Lake Indian Reservation up in northwest Minnesota, about 30 miles north of Bemidji. And they asked me to come talk about the reservation, to talk about my story, blah, blah, blah. So the story begins, I grew up in Chicago. And I always wanted to be a doctor. My grandfather was a surgeon in Chicago, worked in the inner city of Chicago, and he had a deep impact on my life. And I always wanted to be a doctor just like him. And then at the age of 13, the day after Easter, I awoke, went in to ask my mother, who was sick, if she wanted communion that morning, because we lived right across the street from the church. And the priest always came over after Mass and brought Mom communion, and I discovered that she had died during the night. Right before Mass, I saw the nun, the sister. We called her Attila the nun. She was as wide as she was tall, and she wobbled over to the priest and whispered something in his ear. Then that priest came over and he said, "Jerry," he said, "Sister just told me your mom died this morning." He took me in his arms. I could feel his tears run down my cheek. And from that moment on, I was going to be a priest. Now it's funny because after I was ordained right here at Sacred Heart. After I was ordained, I found my mother's prayer book. It's the only thing I have of my mother. I don't only have a picture of my mother. I have her prayer book. And I looked in that prayer book, and there I discovered every night. We remembered this as kids. After there were 7 of us. And so after we ate, we would argue about who would do the dishes or who had to take up the garbage, all that stuff. And we would see our mother off on the side of the couch saying her prayers from this prayer book. Every night I remember her praying out of that prayer book. It was then that I discovered for all those years, my mother prayed that my older brother would be the priest and that I would be the doctor. Now my older brother spent more time in the penitentiary than I spent in the seminary. So I always think that God had the last laugh. Once I discerned to become a priest, I had to ask the question, where? And I wanted to go to a place that needed priests. The one thing that my mother instilled in all of us, she would ask us every night, what did you do for someone else today? And it got to the point where we go, Ma, what did you do for someone else today? And so I wanted to serve in a diocese that needed priests. So I hear about this diocese in northwest Minnesota called Crookston. When I told my dad, he said, "Did you have the map upside down?" Because he wanted me to go to a diocese that was warm. And so I called the Bishop of Crookston, Bishop Pavish at that time. He met me in St. Paul. And we talked about joining the diocese. I joined the diocese sight unseen. Never saw Crookston. And every 2 weeks after that, I kept calling the bishop. I said, "Bishop, can I come to Crookston?" And he would say, "No." I said, "Bishop, can I come to Crookston?" "No." I said, "Bishop, can I come to Crookston?" He was waiting for the spring thaw, which that year was about the 4th of July. And I remember driving up to Crookston for the first time with a young priest from Chicago. We arrived in Crookston. He pulled over to the side of the road. turned off the car, and he looked at me. He says, Jerry, what did you do? He says, they don't need priests up here, they need people. Look around. Huh? I was ordained in that church over there. Huh? I served my first years as an associate here, assistant. Then I went and did Newman work at Bemidji at the State University. Came back as pastor. Served as pastor of Sacred Heart for a number of years. Then I got this call to go to Africa. In Africa for 3 years. I intended to stay there. My plan was to die in Africa. Huh? So when the bishop called me home, he said, you got to come home. So I came home. I intended to give him 6 more years in the diocese and then go back to Africa and die there. Well, as bishops, they have different plans. Huh? I stayed at Detroit Lakes for 15 years. And then one day, the new bishop, Hepner, called me and says, I'm going to move you. And I says, well, it's about time. Huh? He says, I'm going to send you to the missions. Now, people, I could not have been more excited. And he looked at the smile on my face. He says, not those missions. He says, you're going to Red Lake. So I said, oh, God, I get to go there. Huh? I showed up at Red Lake September 2nd, 2009 at 6:02 in the evening. I remember it exactly. I pulled up to the mission, all these buildings falling apart. Huh? And they said, Jerry, you got to live in the old convent. Because the nuns had just left it a couple months ahead of that. And they said, if you don't live there, they will burn it down. So I struggled to find the key for the damn place. Huh? And when I opened up the door, the smell of propane just hit me in the head. I had been locked up all those months. Now I kind of wish I would have thrown in the match. Huh? I walked through that place. Room after room after room, 3 stories of bedrooms. I said, how many nuns lived here? Huh? And then I found the chapel. I had brought the Eucharist with me from Detroit Lakes. We had a funeral that day, and I was at the funeral that morning. In fact, it was Father Monsignor Mike's mother's funeral. So I brought the Eucharist with me. I put the Eucharist in the tabernacle, and I sat and I wept. I cried. I accused God of screwing me. I accused the bishop of punishing me. I kept hearing my doctor. When I told him I was going to Red Lake, he says, Jerry, who did you piss off? And then I made a deal with the Lord. I told the Lord, you stay, I'll stay. Huh? And people, those next months were the most difficult months in my life. Those people did not want me. You know, when you work with generational poverty, generation after generation of poor people, what is most important is relationships. Huh? I had to learn that. And until they know you, and until they know you are there for them, forget it. You might as well just drop dead. And they would have been happy. Huh? I remember coming up the aisle for Sunday Mass, and they'd be talking about me. Oh, we wish, Tim, we wish the Duke Elfies were back. You know. And I remember once turning around and saying, you know, people, you don't have to like me for me to love you. And then they looked at me like, God, he's even more weird than we thought he was. After Mass, I literally collapsed in the sacristy. Finally dragged myself back to the house. And the day after, a seminarian came and found me there. He's now your associate priest, Father John. He came, he found me, shoved me into his car, drove me to the hospital in Bemidji where they rushed me by ambulance to Mayo Clinic, and they amputated my right leg from an infection I had caught in that house. Huh? And I remember that night before the surgery. You know, as a priest, I felt like such a failure. When you work with people that don't want you, and they let it be known, huh? You know, and I kept thinking, what did I do? What did I, you know? And I remember that night before surgery, because they almost did not perform surgery, because I was so sick. I was in renal failure and all this other crap, huh? And so the doctor came in and says, we don't know if we can operate. I said, get this leg off of me. Huh? So they did. But I remember that night before I prayed. I said, God, you know, I don't really mind if I don't wake up. Huh? You know, I just feel like such a failure. Had my leg amputated, I did wake up. You know, God doesn't always give you what you want. He does give you what you need, though, huh? Woke up. My priest friends from Chicago drove up to Mayo Clinic. They shoved me into their car, drove me back to Chicago to rehabilitate, to heal, and they kept telling me, you are not going back to Red Lake. And I said, ooh, I love the sound of that hymn. Let's sing the second verse, huh? But the more and more I healed, the more and more the Lord did a number on me. You know, people, He is the hound of heaven. If you've experienced that, you know what I'm talking about. If you have yet experienced Him as the hound of heaven, I promise you, you will. Huh? And as the hound of heaven, the more I healed, the more He rattled my memory of that first night at Red Lake. He rattled my memory, reminding me of the deal I made with Him. He kept telling me, He says, I'm here. When are you coming home? Now my priest friends hid the keys to my car. They didn't realize I had two sets. Huh? So I got up in the middle of the night, started driving towards northwest Minnesota. It was about a 13-hour drive. And I had yet gotten my prosthetic. So I'm driving with the wrong foot, all this way. When I got to Red Lake, I wanted to kiss the ground. I didn't kill myself or anybody else. Huh? I arrived in time for Mass on Sunday morning. Now, I had yet gotten my prosthetic, so I'm on a walker, wobbling up the aisle on a walker, like a chicken with missing parts, huh? And I'm coming up the aisle, and all of a sudden the organ stops. And they stop singing. And they look. And they look. And all of a sudden the old lady in the back pew said, he's back! They took a good look at me. And I took a good look at them. They thought for sure the amputation of my leg would be my ticket out of Red Lake. And you know what? It almost was. And I took a good look at them. I kept saying, you know, Lord, you have to help me see what you see. You have to help me love these people as you love them. And the more and more, day after day, they began to change before my eyes. I changed in their eyes, huh? Where it used to be, is the priest there? Now they call and say, is our priest there? You know, you made it. Let me tell you about my people. Red Lake is one of the 2 closed Indian reservations in the United States. In other words, it is a state, a country unto itself. Huh? It's closed. Unless you're Native American, you cannot live on the reservation unless you live with me at the mission. The mission is a piece of territory which they do not own. Huh? And so anybody that needs to live, sometimes it's our teachers, sometimes it's the people that work at the mission. I had 2 cops that were hired by the tribe, and they were not Indian, so they had to live with me at the mission. Oh, that was great, having 2 cop cars in front of the house every night, huh? And all the kids, the young kids, they just run to the mission. Because the mission is the safest place on the reservation. People, what do you do in such a situations where it's hopeless? It seems so helpless. Huh? The ones who raise our kids are our grandparents. And I hear after grandparent say, Father, I wish I could move my kids off the reservation to give them a chance. Last night, I had a phone call, 2 in the morning. Some grandma just inherited 5 grandkids. Naked. They took them out of a meth house. And when you come out of a meth house, you can't take anything with you. No toys, no clothing. She says, Father, I don't got any food, I don't got any clothing, I don't got any diapers. I said, well, bring them over. We'll get them over there. Daily. You know? Anybody who underestimates the power of education, anybody who underestimates the power of a Catholic education is a damn fool. We operate a school. Preschool to grade 6. It's our commitment to justice. It's our commitment as a church to do what we can do to help them change that situation. I'm not going to change it. Huh? God, I'm not that daydreaming. They have to change it. One saint at a time. So we operate a school. This year we added 3-year-olds. Next year we are adding toddlers. Then we're going to add 7th grade, 8th grade, and the tribe told me, he says, Father, don't you stop until you have high school. Now people, that's a song I really love to sing. My best years as a priest were here, keeping this high school open. And a lot of your parents, I would say your grandparents, we had in school. That's 40 years ago. And I believe, firmly believe, the power of a Catholic education to transform lives. Whenever I talk about my people, I have to separate the culture from the poverty. Now, I don't know if you study Native American culture. You should. People, Native American culture is awesome. I've got one of the best jobs as a priest. I get to take their culture seriously and then plant the very gospel in the values of that culture. And then sit back and watch it blossom and grow into something beautiful for the kingdom of God. Huh? And you know, it ain't going to look like East Grand Forks. It ain't going to look like Crookston. It'll look like it meant to look like. It'll look like them. People, that's what it means to be Catholic. To be Catholic means the doors are open. We respect all cultures. And when we evangelize them, it's not an issue where they got to look like us. Huh? They need to look like what God is calling them to be. I mean, the more and more you get to know the culture, the more and more I get to know my people. You know, my people, Native Americans, have a sense of humor. They have more fun at a funeral than we will ever have at a wedding. I mean, I just had a funeral the other day. An hour and 45 minutes of them telling stories about this guy. And half of the stories, I would go, oh God, not that one. Oh God, not that one. You know, I'm sorry, Jesus, for that one. You know? Because if you get a laugh, it's like Saturday Night Live. Huh? And then I got to get up and continue with the Mass. They have an awesome reverence for nature. They love their kids. Some very powerful values Native Americans have. But the poverty creates the hell they live in. When I was sick in Chicago, healing, Bishop came and had Mass with my kids a couple times. And I got home and he called me, he says, "You know, Jerry," he said, "a lot of your kids aren't baptized." I said, "I know, Bishop. I would say maybe a third of them are baptized." "They're not baptized." He said, "You got to get them ready, and then I'll come and we'll have a big baptism." I said, "No, no, no, no. We don't do it that way." He said, "Well, how do you do it?" I said, "Oh, I'm much more subversive. My kids drive their parents and their grandparents nuts until they get baptized. One saint at a time." I had Josh. Josh that year was in 5th grade. And he wanted to be baptized. And so Grandpa, who raised him, he kept saying, "Grandpa, call Father Jerry." Grandpa just ignored him. So that April we had the carnival, our school carnival, and Grandpa was there. And I could see Josh going up to Grandpa saying, "Grandpa, there he is. Go talk to him." And Grandpa ignored him. So Josh grabs him by the true seat of wisdom, one cheek in each hand, and shoves him into my face. And he says, "Grandpa, now ask him." This kid wants to be baptized. What do I got to do? We need to talk about it. So we baptized Josh at a school mass. You know, part of baptism, you get a white garment. I didn't have a white garment big enough for Josh. So I gave him one of my white golf shirts. And Josh, every Sunday after that, would walk 3 miles carrying that golf shirt. Put it on when he got to church. And he kept telling Grandpa, "You know, Grandpa, Father Jerry needs me. He needs me to serve Mass for him." Save a nation, one saint at a time.